So, Sergeant Lindsay, we appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, this discussion with us. How you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So, a couple talking points that we're just going to go over. The first one here, and you and I discussed this. Cannabis, it affects areas of the brain that control movements, balance, coordination, memory, and judgment. So, obviously, when we think about driving and we think about how those are faculties and abilities that are required, um, can you expound a little bit more once again on why a person needs to be mindful of operating a vehicle under THC when it comes to those things being impaired?
Right. I think a misconception is that I think majority of people when they're using marijuana, they don't realize what it's actually doing to their body or what it's doing internally.
Right.
Um, One thing I would relate marijuana use to is maybe thinking of like a pond with like a duck on top of the pond all
Okay.
by itself, calm water, but underneath the wheels are turning. So
Right.
the feet are going a million miles an hour, but on top of the water, it's smooth as glass.
Right.
So think of that as far as like maybe how the human body interprets marijuana use, and maybe trying to put that in the position of you like trying to operate a vehicle, maybe it make a little bit more sense. Um, Obviously, when you're driving on any kind of road, you want to make sure you're sober. Um,
Right.
and treat it, and I would treat marijuana the same as anyone would treat uh, drinking alcohol.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Right.
Different drug categories, they do both impair your ability to operate a motor vehicle safely.
Right.
So some of the things that you could think of that what marijuana would do is it obviously the smell of marijuana instantly we can smell that when we come up to a car. As far as police officers, it's kind of a one of the most prevalent signs if we can smell if it's freshly smoked. But some of the causes and effects of it, it'll give you paranoia, fatigue, eyelid tremors, body tremors. There's things that happen with your eyes as far as rebound dilation, elevate your taste buds. Um, just in general, you even have like increased appetite, relaxed inhibitions. Um, Overall, just if you put yourself in a position from when you were sober driving a vehicle to having something in your body that's now manipulating the way you're thinking, the way you're acting, that could be the difference between you drifting over the fog line, and getting into a crash, or, I've heard from other people that have used marijuana. They think that they drive more cautiously, and maybe that is the case for some people. They drive more cautiously. Um, but at the same point, they're driving at super slow speeds, which
Right.
gives the ability for someone to rear end their vehicle now, or it puts somebody else in a dangerous situation. You're not at 100%, so thinking about your family on the road or anybody else. I don't think anyone would want to be on any road with anybody who's impaired, where
Right.
it cause some tragic incident. So.
Right. So what do you say to the person that hears that? I mean, obviously THC, it's a psychoactive compound in cannabis. So as you're talking about once again, and I appreciate you kind of just laying out the effects there. It impairs judgment, coordination, reaction times, which once again, these are key to safe driving. What do you say to the person out there that just goes, well, it's better than driving drunk, right? I mean, what would you say that there's a misunderstanding out there in the public that smoking weed is not as bad or as reckless as driving under the influence of alcohol?
No, it is the exact same thing.
Okay.
And everybody is different. Now, in Michigan, we have laws for alcohol that everyone's aware of. So you see all the signs: drive sober, pull over,
Right.
get pulled. The zero point zero 0.08 blood alcohol content. That's that's pretty known by everybody. But in Michigan, since marijuana has been legalized, there is no per se limit of active THC levels in your system, to which where we would just say, oh, you have 1 nanogram of this in your system and you're going to jail. So
Right.
in order for us to find you impaired, we would need to have the active nanogram of delta 9 THC and impairment. So just
Okay.
the two causes together. Now that doesn't mean you can just smoke and then just 3 hours later, just start driving your car again. Like, oh yeah, I'm okay, because it could impair you up to 24 hours.
Right, right, right.
Especially with some of the newer strains of marijuana and the way technology is advanced, the marijuana now is so much different from the marijuana that was around in the 70s.
Right.
Been a lot more advancement as far as that goes, and what it does to your body. And no, it's the same thing. You treat it the same way. Driving under the influence of alcohol is extremely similar to driving under the influence of cannabis,
Hmm.
and it can cause the same problems. And same thing with legal ramifications as well. We treat OUID the same as OWI. So, if you get arrested for OUID, then those same sanctions come into play as
Okay.
far as what would happen for operating while intoxicated. So,
Okay. I think that's important to note and realize because, yeah, I would think that there's probably some misconceptions out there, especially with, cannabis, marijuana being legal now. And once again, that mindset that I know is very prevalent in regards to where maybe it's seen as not as bad as other drugs. It's not as, it's not as reckless as other drugs. I think the baseline element here and the correlation is that it does impair drivers. It impairs judgment. It does affect motor skills. And these are all things that are required for safe driving. And it's interesting too, like when you say because I've heard people say this as well, like, well, I feel like I'm more cautious. But that's kind of a relative term because, like you said, the version of cautious for a person that's under the influence of THC may still put them in a state where it's dangerous because they're driving 5 miles an hour down a road that's, 25 miles per hour speed limit or, something faster. Because once again, their ability to perceive caution is impaired. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah.
So,
And I've seen it numerous times. And like I said, with the people say, I feel like I'm driving more cautious now, or I'm more relaxed. And I get it. Like I get
right,
it. You smoke marijuana all the time, and this is not to deter anyone from smoking marijuana. If you're of the legal age and you can purchase it, you can possess it.
right.
That's not what it's about. But the big thing is, just because you think you're driving fine does not mean you're actually driving fine. And
Okay.
Not stress that enough, especially a 2 3 hour window right after you smoke the marijuana or use the marijuana. That's where you're really gonna get those effects right off
Right.
the. But again, it can impair you up to 24 hours. So you don't know. I mean, like I said, everyone's got a different body type, metabolism rate, so it's different from person to person, and that's why we utilize drug recognition experts. So I'm one of them. I believe there's about 140 in the state of Michigan.
Okay.
What we do is we really look at the driving. We look at not just because someone used the drug, or used cannabis, but we look at the totality of everything and run it through a 12-step process, and then we can determine the impairment level and then what drug category that person may fall under. So there's a lot more to it than just saying, like, if someone were to go to the bar and get one drink, you know, most people should probably feel fine to drive. If it's a regular drink you've been eating throughout the day, you had a very light beer, right? So it's one beer.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe I think people tend to think the same thing with marijuana, but those levels aren't, you know, as consistent as where you could be like, all right, if I drink this, at 5 o'clock p.m. and I wait an hour, I should be good to go. You
Right.
know, Marijuana is just a different deal, and a different does different effects to your body.
Right. So when you look at something like, obviously alcohol and drinking alcohol while driving, so drinking while driving is obviously illegal. It's something you're not supposed to do because obviously you are impairing yourself while you're operating a vehicle. However, a person could be, let's say a child could be in the car, which once again, it's not safe at all to do that. But the issue that is at hand is the child's safety in regards to the operator's ability to drive. When you look at something like marijuana, though, and let's say a child is in the car and the individual is smoking, is there any legal ramifications for that with a kid even being in the car as well that adds on to the ramifications of driving while under the influence?
Right. So now you're looking at a child endangerment charge.
Okay. Okay.
So it would be the same as alcohol.
Right.
You're at a level where you're deemed to be impaired. yeah, it's the same thing. And I don't know, and I have a child myself. There is absolutely no way I could ever think about getting in a car and feeling like I'm under the influence of anything and
Right,
feeling safely drive my kids somewhere. It just as a parent, that's completely wrong. So if people are doing that, I would really hope that that's not
right,
as if they continue to do or whatever think about doing. You just have to always think about your family and think about the other people too that are driving on the roads with you.
right,
Um, you know, and like I said, the stuff is legal. I mean, and we're not here to deter anyone from purchasing if they're allowed to purchase it and whatever. But just making sure, on top of making sure you're safe, making sure your family's safe, your wife, your husband, your children. But you shouldn't be driving at all if you have been smoking marijuana and have a kid in the car. That's just
right.
morally wrong. So,
Okay. Right.
yeah.
So in closing, Sergeant Lindsay, what are some things, obviously when people are driving, and I keep kind of going back to alcohol because it's kind of the comparison here that some people like to use.
Yeah.
You pull a car over, maybe once again you said the scent is something that's obvious to put up some red flags. What are some of the things that you guys do to test impairment of the driver after? Is it mimic that of what you would do for like a sobriety test for someone when they're driving under the influence of alcohol?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
Okay,
what typically will happen is I'll stop the driver. We'll start talking to the driver, start picking up on signs of impairment, whether they're, how their speech is. I'm looking at their eyes. I'm taking everything in. I'm talking to them. I'm trying to determine whether or not this person is impaired. If I have any belief that they're impaired by anything, I'll have them exit the vehicle and I'm running through the standardized field sobriety test.
okay,
So um, so that includes like running them through horizontal gaze nystagmus, the walk and turn, and the one leg stand. Run them through a lack of convergence test, modified Romberg, finger to nose, and I'm just putting everything into play. And just because you failed one test or you showed clues of one thing, again, we don't look at just one aspect of this or one thing of impairment. We're taking
right,
it all. Why did we stop you? What did you tell me? What was our conversation like? What did I see? Now I'm observing all these signs and clues of this. So I take all that in, and then what I'll do at that point is I'll make my determination whether or not that this person's impaired or not. Go to the next level, and then we'll go to I'll offer up a blood test. In Michigan, we have implied consent. So with a driver's license, you're required to submit to a chemical test upon a police officer asking. And once we determine what we're going to do or what hospital we're going to go to for the blood test, that's where I could begin a drug recognition expert evaluation. We can we'll further talk about the circumstances at large.
okay.
Yeah.
Sergeant Lindsay, I appreciate the time. This is great information. Is there anything you want to close with, add onto the conversation? Anything you felt like we missed?
I cannot stress enough. If you are smoking marijuana, please do not drive a car. That's the biggest thing. We talked about it with kids in the car, family members, and other people on the road. It's not worth it. It really is not worth it. The damage you're going to cause to not only your family, somebody else's, the repercussions that come with it. It doesn't matter. Just if you're going to smoke marijuana, stay at home. And just remember, it could be impairing up to 24 hours. And that 2 to 4 hour window in between is probably when you're most high. So just keep that in mind if you are smoking marijuana. Be aware of what's going on around you, and make sure you're always driving safe. So
Good message. Good message. Sergeant Lindsay, once again, I appreciate the time and thank you for everything that you do.
thank you, sir. Appreciate it.